Buenos días. Hoy es sábado. Voy a tratar de seguir la rutina normal de cuentos los sábados a las 10. Empecé un poquito tarde porque fui a sacar libros. Voy a empezar una serie de libros honrando a Martin Luther King, que normalmente se celebra Black History Month, la historia de los afroamericanos en enero, y también febrero, creo. Yo tengo una colección bastante amplia de Martin Luther King y muchos otros líderes hicieron la diferencia para los afroamericanos. Entonces quisiera compartir unos libros durante este mes y quizás el que entra. No sé si saben, pero el día 15 es el cumpleaños de Martin Luther King, donde se celebra y se honra a él y sus valores que nos enseñó y que nos ayudó a protestar pacíficamente para la libertad de los afroamericanos en muchas cosas, incluyendo el derecho a votar, que fue un sacrificio que se hizo, que costó vidas y sacrificio y mucho dolor para mucha gente. Así que por eso es que es importante que utilicemos ese derecho que nos han dado, porque no fue en vano, gente murió por ese derecho. Y por eso es que quiero empezar a leer sobre los afroamericanos, aunque los afroamericanos, los latinos y otras gentes que han contribuido positivamente a nuestro país, incluyendo a nuestra gente, a los mexicanos, los latinoamericanos, toda la gente de los diferentes países de Centro y Suramérica que han contribuido positivamente. Se deben de reconocer durante todo el año, no nomás es un mes de su sacrificio y sus contribuciones. Entonces yo voy a tratar de leer de esos libros para terminarlo ya aunque se pase el mes de enero, que termina el día de African American Month. So I'm going to start a unit on Black History Month, honoring Martin Luther King and many other leaders that sacrificed and gave their life for the plight of the African American. Even though African Americans and all minorities that sacrificed and gave their lives for our country, to make life better, to liberate people that were under bondage, that couldn't vote and couldn't go to schools, were segregated, were separated, and were suffering. I want to honor them throughout this month and the following month and throughout, because I don't think that we should remember these courageous people, these heroes, for just 1 month out of the year. It should be all through the year. So today I'm going to start with another a story. Before I start reading of the different Martin Luther King books, I have a good collection of them, of Black history and even African folk tales and poetry and things that I will share with you throughout. But today I want to start with this story. It's an award winner, one of my favorites that I used to read to my students. It is Richard Wright and the Library Card. Este libro lo voy a leer en inglés primero. Se intitula Richard Wright y su tarjeta de biblioteca. Parece algo muy sencillo, pero en realidad no es. Porque con este libro hubo un gran sacrificio para que sepan cómo la gente de antes sufría y sacrificaba y no tenía ciertos derechos. I have, I don't know, I brought this book, and I know I have another one downstairs, and I brought the one that's been written on. I don't know why it's written on, but I will read it anyway. I apologize for the writing. I brought it because it's the hardcover. The other one is soft cover. Oh, here it is. I'll read this one. See, soft cover. So, este libro demuestra la importancia de algo muy sencillo que mucha gente no toma ventaja, sin saber que gente no tenía ese privilegio y hizo lo imposible para ganarse ese privilegio de agarrar sencillamente una tarjeta de la biblioteca para poder leer, que era algo que no se les permitía a los afroamericanos, que no querían que supieran leer. So, Richard Wright luchó y tuvo que hacer diferentes cosas para poder obtener una tarjeta que él valorizaba muchísimo, igual como valorizar un pasaporte, una mica, el derecho de entrar a Estados Unidos, porque esto para él significaba la libertad. So this may seem like a very simple thing. Who cares about a library card? I know many kids don't even have one or don't care to have one, and they should know the value of it because a lot of people sacrificed for it. And Richard Wright, in this story, it shows how he suffered and what he had to do to obtain one and how that was liberty for him. I lost a page. I don't know where it goes. I'll try to fit it in because I'm not sure where it goes. I'm trying to find it. I'm sorry. Maybe if I look at the other written book. Oh well, I'll start it. Okay, so Richard Wright and the Library Card. This is by William Miller, illustrated by Gregory Christie. It is dedicated to his son Julian. Books are the road to the promised land, he writes. So see, this is a promised land that Martin Luther King talked about. That books are that key. It is education, it is knowledge, it is power. Richard loved the sound of words. He loved the stories his mother told him about the farm where he grew up. So here's Richard when he was a little boy and the old farm he used to live in. There was a willow tree by the bend in the river, she explained. I dreamed all my girls' dreams down there. Richard loved to hear his grandmothers tell about the war, how they ran away from his master and fought the rebel army. I was only a boy, his grandfather said proudly, but I fought as well as any man. I fought in the rain and the mud. I carried the flag to the head of the troops. So he heard it from his grandpa who fought for his freedom. I think he's talking about the Civil War in the 1800s. Richard longed to read stories on his own, but his family was poor. They moved often, looking for work in different towns and cities. His father cleaned offices. His mother cooked in the kitchens of wealthy white people. Richard had little chance to go to school. His mother taught him when she could, reading the funny papers out loud, sounding each word carefully. So he didn't have the privilege to go to school. Something also that I think many of our kids take for granted and don't value as they should. I gotta find the book. Sorry. Here it is. Trying to find where that page is so I don't miss. Okay. It's going to be after that one. Okay. I found it. That way I'll know where to put this page that fell out. Apologize. Okay, so his mom would read to him, sounding every word When Richard finally learned to read, he couldn't buy or borrow the books he wanted so badly. Books were expensive. The doors of the library were shut against him because he was black. So black people couldn't go in the library because they didn't want them to read. Because reading, like I said, is power. It is liberty, freedom. So Richard read whatever he could find. Old newspapers, books without covers pulled from ash cans. When Richard was 17, he caught a book to Memphis. He hoped to find work, earn enough money to move to Chicago where he could make a new life for himself in the North. So, see, where there's a will, there's a way. He taught himself to read by picking up old newspapers. And here, sadly, we have tons of books, libraries, and many of our kiddos choose not to read. That's why the love of reading is so important. So they read for pleasure, not just because they are made to read. Richard walked the hot streets looking for a job that would be his ticket to freedom. He saw many young men like himself searching the same job, the same way out. He finally found a place in an optician's office. He polished eyeglasses, swept the floors, and ran errands for the white men. As long as he kept his head down, as long as he began every sentence with "Sir," Richard was safe. So even though there was a little bit of freedom here, he still knew what his place was. He had to keep his head down because you couldn't look a white man in the face, and you always had to address them as "Sir." Okay, I found the page. I have to tape it. At night, Richard turned to the boarding house where he had rented a room. To save money, he ate beans from the can, warmed by water from the tap. So wow, all all he could eat was beans, and he didn't have a stove, so he had to. Sorry about my bells. Ah, I should have turned them off. So he didn't even have a stove, so he put his can underneath the warm water to warm up his dinner, which was a can of beans. You see that right there? So he made a sacrifice. He ate like this so he could save money because he had a dream just like Martin Luther King. He knew what he had to sacrifice, he had to save. Listen to the noise of the street below the window. Richard felt a similar hunger for words. There were thousands of books in the public library, but only white people could get a card, could get could take them out. But Richard had an idea. At work, he looked around the office trying to find one man who might understand his hunger for books. So he had a hunger for books. I wrote in my when I spoke at as a keynote speaker at the Hispanic Annual Salute. I shared how I had a thirst for knowledge. I always wanted to be behind the desk, and I still do. That's why I still continue to have classes through Zoom. In my last year of teaching, after 31 years of teaching, at age 59, I was still going to school for my last certification as to get national board certified. I love the challenge. I always like to learn. I still do. For the most part, they were like many white men he had known before. They would never understand a black boy who wanted a library card, a black boy who wanted to read books even even though they didn't read. Only one man seemed different from the others. Jim Flack kept to himself, and the other men ignored him, as they ignored Richard. Several times Richard had been sent to the library to check out books for him. One day, when the other men were out to lunch and Jim was eating alone at his desk, Richard approached him. "I need your help," Richard said. Are you in the same kind of trouble? Jim asked with a suspicious look. So here he approached Jim, because he was a little different and he was eating by himself. And so Richard thought he could ask him a question. Are you in some kind of trouble? Jim asked with a suspicious look. I want to read books. I want to use the library, but I can't get a card, Richard said, hoping Jim would not laugh at his face. What do you want to read? Jim asked cautiously. Novels, plays, history. Richard felt confused. His mind was racing so fast he couldn't think of a single book. Jim said nothing. He reached into his desk and brought up a worn white card. He handed it to Richard. How will you use it? Jim asked. I'll write a note, Richard said, like the ones you wrote when I got books for you. All right, Jim said nervously, but don't tell anyone else. I don't want to get into trouble. No, sir, Richard promised. I'll be careful. So he's going to help him. He's going to allow him to go get books with his card. After work, Richard walked through the crowded streets to the library. He felt as if he were on a train to Chicago, as if he were traveling north already. So he was so excited with the library card in his hand, thinking, I'm on my way to liberty, to Chicago, to find my dream and a new, better life and better life. Oh, but look at this. Look at his obstacle. Look at that librarian. But when Richard walked through the door, he felt the old fear again. Many heads were raised at the sight of a black boy in the library. Richard kept his eyes down, not looking up until he stood before the checkout desk. The librarian put on her glasses to make sure she wasn't seeing things. Richard handed her the note he had written and stepped back. Why can't Mr. Flack get his own books? She asked sharply. He's very busy, Richard replied, his legs trembling. All right, the woman said, but you tell Mr. Flack I'd rather see him in person next time. Richard roamed the stacks, unable to believe there were this many books in the world. He touched the leather spines and fingered the pages he had dreamed about for a long time. So Richard could not believe all the books there were. He touched them as if they were a fine cloth, valuable cloth. They were leather spined. Are you sure these books aren't for you? The librarian asked in a loud voice when he went to check them out. Look at her, suspicious of him, because she, like many others, did not want Richard to get his hands on books. They were not allowed to read. Once again, heads turned, and Richard felt the eyes of the white people on him. He thought he had been caught, that he would never be able to read the books he wanted so badly. But Richard told the lady what she wanted to hear, what she believed was true about all black boys like him. No, ma'am, he said, these books aren't for me. Heck, I can't even read. The librarian laughed out loud and stamped the books. Richard heard other people laugh as he walked out the door. Oh, can you imagine people laughing at you? At night in his room, Richard read until the sun dimmed the electric light. He read the words of Dickens, Tolstoy, Stephen Crane. He read about people who had suffered as he had, even though their skin was white. They longed for the same freedom Richard had spent all his life in trying. So here he is all through the night reading until the morning. Couldn't believe he had all these books at his disposal. When the light of the sun came through the window, Richard put down the book. He felt sleepy, but the words he had read echoed in his ears, colored everything he saw. He wondered if he would act differently, if others would see how the books had changed him. Richard knew he would never be the same again. That morning he carried the books to work in a newspaper. Whenever he had a chance, whenever the office was empty for a moment, he read. Mr. Falk walked over, pretending that he was asking Richard to go and pick up the laundry for him. What did you get? He asked under his breath. Richard opened the newspaper and showed him. Jim was shocked at first, but then a smile came over his face. Those are powerful books, Richard, he said. Those books will stay with you for the rest of your life. But for now, he said, looking around the office, you should keep them for yourself. So, did you know that books had power? They are so powerful, they will inspire you to do the things that you seem are impossible. Behind here on my shelf, I have some of the best books. Alma Florada and Joan Yelman and the book thief, a little girl that would steal books, is a book I read that is just, they made a movie out of this. It is such an amazing book. She too had to steal books because she wanted to read so much. And then she became this award-winning, famous author. So books have power. That's why reading is so very important. Here's the next illustration. Richard tried to do just that, but at the time for the journey north came, he didn't care who saw him reading. The men in the office either laughed at him or asked him if he was crazy. He's a colored boy what's a colored boy like you toting a bag full of books around you? Your hand can't hold all them big words. Even now and then, Jim smiled at them from across the room. The library books had changed some of Richard's feelings about white people. Richard still feared them, but he understood them better. The day he left for Chicago, Richard stopped by the Falk's desk. Thank you, Richard said. Thank you for the books. Thank you for everything. Jim didn't say a word, but he shook Richard's hand in front of everybody. And all the people were shocked. What was this guy shaking the hand of this black boy? So here he goes. He's on the train heading to Chicago to fulfill his dream. On the train going north, flying across the open field, Richard remembered the books he had read. The words came back to him. The stories were more real than the train itself. Every page was a ticket to freedom, to the place where he would always be free. And that is how Richard Wright became the man he became as an adult, because reading books were his ticket to freedom. Let's see what the author's notes say about him, because I didn't read this to find out. It says, Richard Wright and the Library Card is a fictionalized account of an important episode from the life of Richard Wright. Wright was born in September of 1908 near Natchez, Mississippi. His family moved often looking for work, and Richard was educated in a number of different schools, kind of like me migrating back and forth to different places. His formal education ended after he completed the ninth grade in 1926. Then he moved to Memphis and worked for an optical company. During this time, he gained access to the public library with the help of a co-worker. He read many books during this period, which inspired him to become a writer. Richard moved to Chicago in 1927, worked for the post office before publishing his first stories. His novel, Native Son, published in 1940, became an international bestseller. Black Boy, his autobiography, was published in 1945 to great acclaim. This book is based on the scene from The Black Boy. Richard Wright died in France in 1960. So because he loved reading so much, he became this famous author that published amazing stories. So you see the sacrifice and how many people couldn't even get a library card. And here we have access to all kinds of library books, libraries, mobile libraries. And many of our kids don't read as much as they should or at all. Some of them are too busy with their technology, their gadgets, their games. That's why I encourage parents to please begin to build a library. Have your kids have a book in hand so that they can dream and discover places that they might inspire to go and visit as they get older or become someone that inspires them to be a leader, a sports person, so that they know that sports is not a matter of I want to be a football player or a soccer player. It takes going to school to college to be recruited. So in order to make it to college, you have to be a good reader. In any job, even if you just go to high school, you have to be a good reader to read instructions and be able to do well in your job on your job. So anyway, books I didn't have as a kid because growing up as migrants and moving back and forth, we didn't have the money or nobody in my family really read a lot. I know my brother Daniel loved novelas, and my brothers would pick up magazines to read on the road, like Mad Max, or I don't know, different magazines. When we were kids in Montana, we would go to in Terry, we would go to the pharmacy to buy the comic books. I remember I used to buy Betty, Richie Rich, and different kinds of comics. The superheroes my brothers would write, or they would pick up magazines that talked about UFOs in Montana way back then in the 1970s, early 1970s. So we read some, but not as much as I do now. So that's why I have a collection of books. I have been trying to give some of my old books away, and now I'm using them to do this reading, which I enjoy a lot because I'm hoping that somebody will pick them up and begin to like to read, and parents can help their kids have their own collection. So I am going to take a short break to break off and then come back to do this story in Spanish so that I could be done for the day. I need to start taking down my Christmas stuff a little at a time. Indoors, because outdoors it's supposed to snow in a little while. Then I've got one of my favorite stories about snow that are related to African Americans that I will share when it snows. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this story. I hope that you honor Black History Month by reading about them online, or if you have books, or if parents can order you books. I know my daughter has been ordering my books when I can't go out. Um, so I'll have to see what other books I might want to read. There is one from a Latina, I don't know what South American or Central American, the undocumented Americans. Supposed she wrote this. She's a doc. She got her doctoral degree, and it's supposed to be a really good book. She was I think she was a DACA kid that graduated, got her doctoral degree, which is very, very impressive. and now she's published this book. But I haven't read Isabel Wilkerson's Cast, so I still have something to read yet. I haven't finished that I got from months ago because I've been writing, and then Christmas came along. But I'm going to have my daughter order me that book, Undocumented Americans, just to learn, because I read as a writer, to learn things to apply to my own writing, and also to read a good book. All right. I will see you in a little bit. Take care, stay safe, stay warm. I know there's a a cold, uh, cold wind, and maybe some snow in Texas, even by Austin, which is pretty down south. I don't know if it'll get to Eagle Pass, to my hometown, but I know it will be cold. I know we're gonna get snow here. I'm kind of looking forward to that. I love to see the snow through my window. So, anyway, stay warm. I will see you in a little bit. Adios.